magical apps with Asterisk. Brief introduction. My name is Ben Klang. I'm from the city of Atlanta, which is a great and fine city to be from. Quick question, who has seen me present before at Asterisk? Awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming back to see me. Those of you who do know me know that I have been involved with an open source project called Adhesion for about the last 7 years. Adhesion is a framework for building voice applications, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. By day, I work at a company called Power Home Remodeling. We do windows, siding, and doors, and we do a lot of technology to make sure those doors and windows get delivered and installed the right way. So that's kind of my background. I've been working with telecom for probably close to 15 years now, and I've been doing, in particular, WebRTC for the last 3 years. And this communications technology has always been a passion of mine, so I'm happy to share that here. All right, quick rundown of the agenda, what I want to talk about in this presentation. First of all, we'll give some examples of magical applications. What makes an app magical? Actually, the second part is what makes an app magical. And then the third is I have a demo for you to show you some of these ideas in practice. All right, so we'll start with some examples. These are some, when you think of a voice application, this is probably some of the things that come to mind. An IVR, contact center, corporate directory. And if they're done right, they can be magical. They can be magical, meaning the kind of experience where someone feels like they were understood, their problem was solved quickly and easily. My favorite saying, and where the title of this presentation comes from, is any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And I really like that philosophy. If we can give the user such a tremendously positive experience that they come away feeling like it's magic, then we've succeeded. But these are all kind of the obvious ones, right? Magical applications can look like other things too. They might be a talking dog robot. It could be a doorbell or a rocket launcher or even a helicopter. These are more like the kind of things you saw in the dangerous demos yesterday. And I mention them in part because they're fun, right? I mean, who doesn't like to see a talking dog robot or a toothbrush controlled by Asterisk? But also I think when we start to stretch our minds and think outside the box of what's possible, yes, these are not likely to make any million-dollar company, but some of the ideas and the creativity that goes into making them can be applied to other pursuits within communications. So the talking dog robot, this is my friend Tim Panton last year winning the dangerous demo, a Lego dog that is actually running a custom implementation of WebRTC that he wrote for this Lego app. It was pretty cool. I think he actually had Allison voice some audio prompts for it as well. And to give kind of another silly example, this is from 2 years ago. This is a USB Nerf rocket launcher with a webcam attached to it. And in the background is a browser running WebRTC, and you could speak to it, and you could actually you could turn the missile launcher and fire it. Again, kind of silly, but fun. And then how about this example, which looks kind of silly at first, right? It's a door intercom in a telephone booth. This application uses exactly 0 lines of code. But what it solved an actual problem we had. So my wife runs a co-working space in Atlanta, and this co-working space is kind of long the way it's laid out. And so she had 2 problems. One is if someone came to the door and knocked, she probably didn't hear it. And 2, if she actually did hear it, then she had to sprint across the office before they thought nobody was home and left. So we installed this kind of slick telephone booth with an antique telephone in it. And I am not old enough to remember the originals of these things, but what I can tell you is they are very loud. And so when someone comes to the front door and pushes the button, the phone rings, and she can hear it wherever she is, and she can also get to it and speak to the person on the other end without having to dash across the office. So this is not anything sophisticated at all, right? This was like, the weekend project was mostly lifting that 4,000-pound monster down the stairs. But it solved a problem, and I think that's the more important thing to take away from this. If you take nothing else away, please remember that the technology is supporting the solution rather than the other way around. All right, so what makes an app magical? There are 3 things I think that kind of have to coalesce. The first I've already touched on is purpose. I really hope that when you're building something, you have the problem in mind first. I hope that you're thinking about the issue that you are attempting to solve, why you're trying to solve it, and who you're trying to solve it for. Because without those things, you're probably not going to build something very useful. The next is design. And design isn't just about making it prettier. In fact, I think that's probably the most useless definition of design. What design really is about is making what you're building useful to use it. Is this cutting in and out? Can you guys hear me okay? It's cutting out? All right, let me swap mics. David, could I? Oh, is there one here? All right, how about this? Sound good? Good. All right, so design is pretty important, right? Because you need to understand the context of your user. Are they in a noisy environment? Are they at their desk? Are they on a cell phone? Are they at a web page? What information do they have readily available? Kind of my favorite anti-design pattern here is if you've ever called Comcast and they don't recognize you from your phone number, the first thing they ask for is your 16-digit account number. Has anyone in here ever memorized their cable company's account number? Never, never. If you go through the menu a couple more steps, they let you look up by phone number, but why not present that option first? That just blows my mind. So design is very important. And the last piece is technology. So again, I always intentionally mention this one last because technology should support the other two. First, figure out the problem you're solving. Next, figure out how to solve that problem best. And then figure out the technology that you should bring to apply to solve the problem. And if you do it right, the intersection of those three things is where the magic is. So we'll talk first about purpose. As I mentioned, you got to keep your focus on the goal. And I have some good, I know I kind of made fun of Comcast here. I have some good examples. I like the way Delta does it. There are a couple things they do right. First is they recognize me when I'm calling in. In the rare cases I need to call in, they recognize me. I fly a lot, so I have premium status with them. And they realize that when I'm calling in, I've probably already tried to solve my problem other ways, through the app, through the website. And what they do is they connect me to an agent very quickly. And that just makes my experience with them that much better. And by the same token, the tools they give me in other modes on the website and on the mobile app usually do solve my problem. So I'm not calling them for something silly like move my seat or what time is my flight or is there a gate change. Another good example, I'm going to give Comcast credit here. If you have an upcoming service appointment and they recognize you, they prompt you for that when you call in. So when I'm calling in, if they see that I have an open ticket or open service appointment, rather than sending me through a generic queue to find out what I need, they ask me, are you calling about your service appointment? If I say yes, I have additional options like, do you want to reschedule it? Are you wanting to know where the technician is? Now, where the technician is a separate problem that the phone can't solve, but at least they're understanding what I'm trying to do. And the last one is Apple. If you ever called Apple and you have an account set up, they'll ask you, are you calling about your MacBook Pro or your iPhone? So again, most of you who are building IVRs already have this intelligence somewhere in your enterprise. So bringing that to bear to improve the experience of your caller is very important. All right, so let's talk a little bit about design. Just like any other app, a voice user interface needs to be designed. Please don't let your CTO design your IVR. Please don't let your assistant at the front desk design your IVR. These are things I have seen, and they rarely end well. And it's not that either of those two people can't do it. They're just not trained, and they're probably not thinking about it the right way. In the case of the CTO, I mean, maybe this person is very good at empathizing and understanding the user, but typically those people are more concerned with either saving money or applying some kind of technology, and they're less concerned with the experience. If you can afford a designer, great. There are some pretty good consulting companies out there that can do it. But if not, and I have some resources here in a minute, there are plenty of resources, ways you can educate yourself on how to improve the experience and learn from those who have gone before. I find it useful always to consider the context of the user. Again, I mentioned, are they in a noisy environment? If so, maybe speech recognition isn't the best way to solve that problem. What kind of information are they submitting? If they're sending a social security number or a credit card number, you might want to give them an option to key it rather than speak it, both for accuracy but also privacy reasons. As I just mentioned, and then of course, if you're in some kind of environment like a car where you need to be hands-free, that's a great candidate for speech recognition. And the last piece of advice on this is when you're designing the user experience, remember to keep the focus on the user. It's not just about making the software easy to build. I'm a developer. I come from that background where I think, this other way of doing it is going to be much harder, so I'm just going to take kind of the easy path out. I'm not saying that you should spend months and months building your IVR, but making it easier for your software developer isn't the primary goal. It's solving the problem. All right, so I promised some resources. I'll leave this slide up for just a second. These are 4 links that I have found useful when I was doing research and I was building IVRs. The first one is a wiki that is maintained by a professional group of voice interaction designers. And these are some pretty deep thinkers in the space. I had the privilege to meet a few of them at Speech Tech a couple years ago and was really impressed at the thoughtfulness and the experience that they bring. And they have put a lot of that knowledge into this wiki. The same group has a LinkedIn, the people that maintain the wiki have a LinkedIn group called Voice User Interface Professionals. And then there are 2 conferences that focus more on this. Speech Tech is more traditional. If you have a contact center, it's an excellent conference for people who are thinking about contact center and IVR. If you're thinking more futuristic, like I have been more recently, things like WebRTC and mobile, then the Mobile Voice Conference is terrific. It focuses a lot on bots and virtual assistants and how the user interface for conversational UI can be brought to bear to solve problems. So all of these are definitely recommended. All right, I think I don't see any more cameras going, so I'm going to move on. And the last piece is technology. This is the fun part. This is kind of the easy part, right? I can geek out on this all day long. So we'll start with, what kind of user input do you have? Is it really just this old rotary telephone? I really hope not. More likely, is it something like a mobile phone? And this is kind of an interesting one because, yes, it's a phone call, but maybe you have another option. Maybe you can confirm things using SMS. So they ask for a ticket number, and after reading it back, you can send them an SMS that confirms that ticket number. Don't constrain your thinking to just one channel. Maybe you're lucky and you're building something with WebRTC, where you have the entire palette of a web browser to show images and rich content, links, something interactive, alongside the audio stream. For media handling, well, we are talking about Asterisk. Asterisk does a great job of giving you all kind of the ability to record audio, playback audio, bridge multiple channels together. I mean, it's a whole toolkit for doing things with media. Some media features that you might want. I, in particular, love speech recognition. I think it's fascinating technology, and it's relatively easy to integrate with Asterisk, either using traditional companies like LumenVox and Nuance with MRCP connections, or more cloud things like IBM Watson or Google. You saw my presentation yesterday. I talked more about those options. Also, there are the possibility to include things like video. Asterisk does more point-to-point, but you can certainly use Asterisk to connect to other services, maybe use FreeSwitch as a video bridge, things like this. And then data sources. You want some data. The whole point of whatever you're doing is probably going to touch some database or some API or some resource somewhere. And so this is a pretty critical piece. And I kind of had to pick some random logos. These are going to really vary based on who you are, what your enterprise looks like. But whether it's a database or a directory or an API, the source of the data is a pretty important component. So you've got all these pieces, and you need to tie them together somehow. And this is where Adhesion comes in. So as I mentioned, Adhesion is a framework. It is the thing that connects all these pieces together. The guy that originally created the Adhesion project, it got its name because he thought of it as adhesion, as in like glue, that you can hear. I think it's a terrible pun. But I appreciate his creativity. Jay was a visionary for trying to understand how these pieces would fit together. And I think he had the idea exactly right. We need something that sits in the middle and pulls these pieces together and makes them usable and accessible. So I want to spend the next couple minutes just talking about Adhesion. I will say this is not the only framework for building voice apps, but it's the one I know best. It's the one I've spent the most time with. And I think it's pretty cool. So what does Adhesion get you? Font's small, sorry about that. It gets you internationalization. So out of the box, we have the ability to adapt prompts to various languages based on who's calling in. It will allow you to connect easily to services like speech recognition and text-to-speech, and we have a whole toolkit for generating the grammars and speech synthesis documents to make for better inputs and outputs. You have an ecosystem of plugins. You have things to talk to MySQL, to Postgres, to Redis, to Elasticsearch, all thanks to the Ruby ecosystem Adhesion lives in. It also has error catching and rich logging, which I have found very helpful in troubleshooting. One of the best things about a crash in something like a Ruby application is you get a stack trace that tells you exactly how you got there, as well as multiple log levels and the ability to send logs to different locations. And you get event handling. So anything that comes in over AMI, every time a phone registers, every time a call goes up or down, every time a key press, occurs, every time you get stats from RTCP, which is media quality, you have access to all of these things, and you can log them, you can act on them, whatever you need. It makes it easy to deploy using packages. So instead of trying to hand configure maybe extensions.conf, you can actually create and distribute your application as a package. So you can install it with something like RPM or dpackage. It allows for unit testing. So as I'm building my app, I have automated tests that I can run continually to understand, have I broken any existing functionality? Does it continue to work the way I expect it to? It's crash resistant because every phone call is protected by the framework. If one call crashes, the rest of them don't go down. One of my sort of favorite counterexamples to this was when Asterisk, I think it was 1.8, released Res Calendar. I love the Asterisk project, but I feel like in this particular moment they may have been slightly misguided because putting calendar functionality in a media engine just seems counterintuitive to me. And the problem is whenever you would have a seg fault, the entire system would go down with it. So one of the things that Adhesion provides is a layer of separation. We isolate both at the call layer, but also at the application layer. Even if one Adhesion instance crashes, you won't necessarily take down calls that are already up. If a call is connected to an agent, that call stays connected. You might lose some functionality until the application comes back, but you don't dump the caller. Adhesion also provides portability, so we have made it very easy, if you need to move between FreeSwitch and Asterisk. We did this not because we think people will be moving constantly, but because it was relatively easy to do since we're abstracting the lower level parts anyway. And it gives you a nice way to do a declarative IVR. I'll give you more of an example of that in a minute, but it makes it possible to specify your flow through the system without thinking in terms of code, but instead thinking in terms of actions the user will take. So basically what I'm getting at here is if Asterisk is the best thing since sliced bread, and it is, then Adhesion is the toaster. All right, I'm going to attempt to do a demo. I don't have, all right, I'm going to switch back to the wireless. Can you hear me? All right, hopefully it won't pop in and out this time. All right, just a moment. Good? Looking good. All right, so this is the entry point to any Adhesion application is this thing called the router. And it's very simple by default. It routes everything into a single sort of context. In this case, we just called it the default context. In this case, it does nothing more than answer the phone and say, hello world. So let's try that. Oh. Hello world. Of course, I forgot I have audio. Let's try this.
Hello world.
Can you hear that? Did it come out? All right, cool. All right, now that's really not very interesting. Hello world is like 101, right? So why don't we make this a little bit more interesting? Everybody loves Twitter, probably. I always like this example because it's a really simple API to integrate, and it works very nicely with speech synthesis. So, can you see that? I can make it a little bigger. Again, because I'm able to take advantage of the entire Ruby ecosystem, all of the gems and libraries and functionality that other people have created, this entire this entire thing which will answer the phone, greet the caller, and pull the latest tweet from Astricon and then read it. All of that happens in about 4 lines of code. I just ask for the user timeline of a given user. I answer the phone call. I say the greeting, and then I read the first tweet. It's really that easy. So let's try that. Oh, Blink crashed. Oops. And if anyone wants to follow along at home, you can check Twitter and see what the latest tweet is.
Here is the latest tweet from Astricon. Asterisk 14.0 now available. Today, the Asterisk development community is pleased to release Asterisk 14, the https://t.
Apparently that tweet was actually cut short. So pretty simple, right? It's not too bad. But really, that's still not all that useful. Why don't we add some more stuff? Another kind of favorite example of IVRs is flight status. Now in this case, I wanted to reach out to another API, maybe something a little bit more sophisticated, and I wanted to make it so that I could ask for the status of a flight based on 3 pieces of information. What's the airline, what's the flight number, and what's the city of departure. Now I've intentionally made this a pretty simple implementation just to try to help follow along. I support 4 airlines: Delta, United, Southwest, and British Airways. I've even made it possible to provide aliases. So if I say Delta or I say Delta Airlines, both of those things are going to map back to Delta. Same with United, and then I have Southwest and British Airways. Now I've only really, trying to remember what my flight number is. I'm going to use my flight for tomorrow. I better figure out what that is. According to Delta, I am on flight 846 out of Phoenix tomorrow. So what you see down here is, this is the IVR. So right here, this is, first of all, it's going to speak the prompt. Now this right here, this is, I talked about internationalization and the ability to greet the call in multiple languages. Right now, we're going to just worry about English. So I will show you what that looks like. Right here is a list of all of the prompts in my application. And this is useful for 2 reasons. Even if I'm only ever building an application in English, the other thing this gets me is a pre-built list of prompts that I can send off to Allison to get recorded. Makes it really easy. And as I make changes to my app, I can use version control to see exactly which prompts have changed and what needs to be updated. Now, the other cool thing about Adhesion is if you provide a prompt and you don't provide an audio file, then it will fall back to the text. So if you have speech synthesis hooked up, you can easily prototype, change prompts, and then when you're happy with everything, send them off for recordings, and they literally just drop in. So that's what it looks like right now. What else do I want to show you? Because I like speech recognition, why not? We're going to make it speech enabled. So I can actually say Delta Airlines or Southwest or British Airways. After that, it's going to go to get the flight number, which looks like this. Now this is a little bit more complicated, sophisticated. This right here is a grammar that matches digits. And what it's allowing is it allows you to enter any digit 0 through 9. This is the speech equivalent, so it lets you say 0 or O as a American English shortcut. But importantly, we also allow DTMF. So whether you speak it or you put the key presses in, it's going to recognize it either way. Then we will just ask for the, where's the prompt? Yeah, we'll say ask for the flight number, and then if we get something that matches, we'll move on to the next one. Built-in functionality here says that if no valid information is heard, either the user doesn't say anything or doesn't enter anything or says something that's not recognized, automatically the app will reprompt. There's no action required by me. That's handled by the framework. Then we go to the last piece, which is getting the origin city. I've only added 1 airport right here, Phoenix. I've given aliases for Sky Harbor or Phoenix International. If all goes well, then we'll jump down here, and we will reach out to an API called FlightAware. Has anyone seen FlightAware? It's like a travel site. They have a really nice API. It makes it possible to look up all kind of flight details, very easy to integrate. And again, I use somebody else's existing functionality to do this integration. Just for reference, there is a fair amount of code here, and yes, I'm very experienced with this framework, but this was still about a day's worth of work for me to put this all together when I built this demo. Now this is rough. There are lots of things I didn't bother to handle, but still, the fact that I can throw this together so quickly means I can be very productive when I'm building something more sophisticated. All right, should we try it? Should we try it? Okay. Just make sure you're still interested. I did forget to mention one thing about the router. So in this case, I had this sort of default route for hello world. So no matter what I dial, I will always reach that point. In this case, I'm going to make it so that if you dial a SIP URI that has flight in the username portion, it's going to match and go to this get airline IVR controller. These filters are really handy if you want to do time of day routing, if you want to route really based on anything. You can route based on whether or not agents are available. You can route based on whether the office is open or closed, and not just by time of day, but actually checking something, some kind of external status. You can route based on the weather if you really wanted to. I don't know why you would. All right, so let's try calling it.
Say the name of your airline.
Delta.
Say your flight number.
846.
Say your flight number.
846.
Say your flight number.
846.
Say the name of the city from which you are departing.
Phoenix.
Say the name of the city from which you are departing.
Phoenix.
One moment, please. Your flight is departing Phoenix for International D. Seattle Tacoma at 23:59.
So there it is. Pretty simple. All right, I'm going to do one more thing just to ratchet up the complexity a little bit. So I've been kind of hinting at the ease with which I can add multilingual support. So I'm going to do that. Yes, I baked this earlier. I have also installed here the synthesis for Italian. I don't have the recognizer in Italian, and truth be told, my Italian pronunciation is awful, so we're not going to do that. But you'll at least be able to hear the prompts in Italian. Now, the reason I show this, and the reason it's important, is I'm not going to change any application logic at all to support multiple languages. All I'm going to change are the prompts, which here are, so this is the English set of prompts. If I flip over here, it's the same list of prompts in Italian, again, useful for sending off to recording. And all the logic is the same. So everything for matching the airline is handled by the same grammar. So I don't have to worry about different ways people might say delta. The app will always get back the same representation. The same is true of numbers. And I would have to provide an Italian equivalent for spoken numbers. Obviously, DTMF is the same in Origin City. But the code, the actual logic for what to do when a flight is selected, all of that is identical. No additional effort. All right, let's try it. Oh, and in the route, you'll notice here that if you dial flight-IT, you'll get the Italian version.
Dimmi il nome della sua aerolinea.
Delta.
Dimmi il nome della sua aerolinea.
Delta.
Dimmi il suo numero di volo. Dimmi il nome della città da cui si sta in partenza.
Phoenix.
Un momento per piacere. Il volo è in partenza da Phoenix da Intel di Seattle Tacoma alle 23:59.
That's all there is to it. Piece of cake, right? Luca, did you get all that? You got an Italian in the back. So that's a magical app. Now, this one doesn't do a whole lot, but I think it illustrates the pieces and how you can start to put those things together. So that's my demo. I have one more thing to share with you, which is sort of my standard issue, a note about interfaces. And specifically in this case, I mean Asterisk interfaces. If you use Adhesion papers over all of the connectivity to Asterisk for you, right? We've already built it to talk to Asterisk or FreeSwitch. You don't have to worry so much about that. You work at a higher level. You're working at the application layer. If you are choosing to build your own or use a library, it is worth thinking about the different ways you can communicate with Asterisk. So in the beginning, there was AMI and AGI. Asterisk Manager Interface, Asterisk Gateway Interface. Show of hands, who knows what these two things are, AMI and AGI? About half the room, OK. They were great for what they are. The other one's ARI, which I'm going to do some comparison here. So AMI and AGI, for what they are, they did a good job, right? They made it possible to interact with Asterisk, uses a TCP socket and a proprietary text protocol. It was synchronous, which was probably the biggest pain point. If anything you wanted to do over AGI, you could only do one thing. Best example of this is if you had an application that would dial out. You literally could not do anything else with that call until the call ended. So if you wanted to start another background process to record or listen for something, there was no way to instruct that channel to do it, at least using AGI. It uses dial plan apps, which is another limitation. Any sort of sophisticated functionality like speech synthesis has to go through a dial plan application, which is pretty limiting. The only real advantage, and this is very quickly becoming not an advantage, is that it works on every version of Asterisk since like 1.2. Long story short, if you are considering implementing a new application, please do not consider AGI or AMI. They're old, they work, but they're not the future. They are the past. So the other one that I want to talk about is ARI. And probably, let's see, who in here has heard of ARI? Okay, actually I think a few more hands, which is encouraging. I gave a similar presentation last year, and the numbers were kind of reversed. More people were familiar with AGI and AMI than they were ARI. So ARI, Asterisk RESTful interface. It uses a more modern and structured request response format, which is HTTP, REST, JSON, which makes it a lot easier, even if you don't use a library, which you should. It makes it a lot easier to interact at a lower level with Asterisk. There were lots and lots of weird parsing behavior that we had to do in Adhesion to cover over AMI and AGI. It is asynchronous, so you can do more than one thing at a time. This is really useful. So Adhesion has a plugin called Matryoshka, which named after the Russian dolls, which is pretty cool because you can do things like start a dial to something else and then leave something listening in the background. My favorite example of this is I can start a call, I can call Luca, and as we're talking, I can press a key that will actually launch another application on my channel. Let's call it a virtual assistant. And I can say, add add Brian to the call. And the other application will then dial out and bridge all three calls together. That kind of thing is hard, if not impossible, to do with AGI and AMI, but it's very easy to do with ARI. It's separate from the dial plan. This used to worry more people because so many people were familiar with dial plan, but in this case, it's a really good thing because we're getting to break away from a lot of the limitations that came from the dial plan. It is only available on Asterisk 12 or newer. Fortunately, like I said, for most people, is anyone running on something older than 12? 11. Okay, that's good. By the way, out of support in like a week? 2 months? It's coming up. Yeah, it goes fast, doesn't it? That's good. I'm always happy to see the number of people who raise their hand go down each year because Asterisk 1.4 stuck around way too long. That's good. So Asterisk 12 and Asterisk 13 has been out for a couple years now. Asterisk 14 was released. Definitely a good time to be current. And as I said, ARI really is the future. So that's a little bit down the weeds. I have a few more resources for you here. If you want to learn more about the framework that I demonstrated, Adhesion, the top link is to the website. The second link is to a project we have called Telephony DevBox. And the goal with Telephony DevBox was to give developers easy tools to build virtual machines for doing telephony. So we have a template for Asterisk, a template for FreeSwitch, a template for LumenVox, a template for Adhesion, and a template for SIP-P with SIP-P Cup, which is a load test harness. I really only kind of referenced it. WebRTC is awesome. I didn't really get into it in this talk, but webrtc.org, if you're interested in putting voice, video, whatever in the browser, that's a great place to start. And this last page is a reference of the Asterisk RESTful interface. So if you wanted to learn more details about what that is, you can go there for that.